Hey everyone, today we are going to do Intro to Ratios. Ratios is our next lesson in our workbook. Last week we've been working on GCF and LCM and a little bit into this week. So this is going to be our next topic, which is going to be called ratios, and we're going to get into that here in just a second. Just want to make you aware that I am here right now, as you can see me, but I'm also going to be walking back and forth to the smartboard so that I can write. So if you ever see me disappear from the bottom corner, that's because I'm writing on the smartboard. So hopefully you can see everything that I'm doing. So let's get rolling here. So let's start with just a real world situation. So this one's going to be about dogs. So all my dog lovers out there, this is for you. In her dog walking business, Mrs. DeCarbo walks 2 large dogs and 8 small dogs. So if we were to picture this, I see my 2 big dogs there, and I see my 8 little small dogs around the side. I don't have any dogs because I'm allergic to fur, but I'm sure a lot of you have dogs. So we have 2 large dogs and 8 small dogs that Mrs. DeCarbo walks in her walking business. It wants us to compare the number of small dogs to the number of large dogs. So let's look at these situations here and try to fill in these numbers. So the first one I see 2 plus blank equals 8. There are blank more small dogs than large dogs. So if I'm working on this, I should be able to fill this in pretty easily, right? So 2 plus blank equals 8. So if we do normal math, we know that 2 plus 6 equals 8. It says there are blank more small dogs than large dogs, so that's going to be 6, right? So that makes sense. Then we're going to go to the next one. 2 times blank equals 8. Well, we know that 2 times 4 equals 8, but in this situation, we're just comparing. So there are 4 times as many small dogs as there are large dogs. Down here, we got 8 minus blank equals 2, which is going to be 8 minus 6 equals 2, because that means that there are 6 fewer large dogs than small dogs. And then lastly, we have 8 divided. So we're using all of our operations here. 8 divided by 4 is going to give us 2. So the number of large dogs is 1/4 of the number of small dogs. So you should be able to see here that we can fill in these math problems on the left-hand side, but then we can use those math problems to compare different things. In this case, we are comparing small dogs to large dogs, but you can compare a lot of different things here. Moving on here. All right, now we're going to talk about what is a ratio. I'm going to head the board here real quick so that you don't have to see all my writing here. But when we're using ratios, we're typically trying to compare. So on my screen here, you should see the definition pop up. A ratio is a comparison of 2 quantities. All right, quantity is just a fancy word for amount of something. So I could have a quantity of Reese's in my desk that I like to eat for a snack. So I might have 4, that's my quantity. Too bad I don't have any Reese's in my desk, but I do love Reese's. Anyway, moving on. So a ratio is a comparison of 2 quantities. So I'm taking 2 things and I'm comparing them. And you're typically using division when you're talking about ratios here. Okay, so there are 3 different ways that you can compare ratios or amounts of things. So I'm going to use this over here, this picture right here with the paper clips. You can see there's 2 red paper clips and there are 6 blue paper clips. And that's going to be kind of what we're comparing. And this is 3 different ways that I can write that. I can write it like this. There are 2 red paper clips for every 6 blue paper clips. Okay, so if I were to use that ratio and I wrote it that way, that means every time I had 2 red paper clips, I would have to have 6 blue. I could also write it like this, 2 to 6. All right, so instead of putting the word 2, this little double dot colon right here is kind of the same type of thing. So I'm saying that for every 2 red paper clips, I'm still having 6 blue paper clips. And then the last way, I can just write it as a fraction. There are every 2 red paper clips for every 6 blue paper clips. All of these different ways work. This one's using a fraction, this one's using a colon, and then this one's just using the actual word 2. Okay, and this is how you would read that again. For every 2 red paper clips, there are 6 blue paper clips. So you always want that 4 to start your sentence, and then you want there after the comma. I'm going to have you try here. So I'm looking over here at the picture. I see there are 4 suns and there are 6 moons. Okay, so I can write that 4 to 6. All right, go ahead and try the next way. Use the colon here. How would I write that? Hopefully you put, oops, where'd it go? Whoops. Okay, for that second one, all right, we are going to write it with a colon. So I'm going to do it the same way as I just did, except I'm going to put a 4. I'm going to put those 2 dots, and I'm going to put a 6 there. All right, and you should know by now the last way we're going to use a fraction. So I'm going to say for every 4 suns, I'm going to have 6 moons. Okay, again, this is how you say it out loud. For every 4 suns, there are 6 moons. Okay, keep that in mind. So those are the three different ways that I can write ratios. Moving on with life. Ratios are always going to be written in simplest form, though. This is important. So when I just had that 4 to 6 example, I can break those down and I can divide out so I can get it simpler. So let's talk about that here. So that very first one we did, 2 over 6. How can I make that fraction smaller but still make it equal to 2 over 6? Well, we have to figure out what I can divide out of the top and the bottom to make it not change as far as the value. So for 2 over 6, what can I take out of 2 and 6 that's not going to change the fraction? Well, I know that 2 can go into 6 because 2 is a factor of 6. So I'm going to say 2 divided by 2 here. And if I divide the 2 up top, I also have to divide 2 out of the bottom, which means that 2 6 is going to equal 2 divided by 2 is 1, 6 divided by 2 is 3. So 2 over 6 also equals 1/3. 1/3 will be our simplest form. Okay? 2 over 6 is good, but 1 over 3 is better. So 1/3 is simplest form here. Okay. Oh, coming a little too far here. Okay. Now looking at our 4 to 6 example. For every 4 suns, there are 6 moons, remember? So I have to look here. What can I take out of 4 and 6 to make it an equal fraction? Well, I'm going to take the same thing out. 4 divided by 2, 6 divided by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3, and I cannot take anything out of 2 and 3 to make it simpler, so 2/3 is going to be simplest form right there, okay? So always try to reduce to simplest form. All right, moving on, let's practice here. I'm going to give you a problem, and we're going to practice it here. So it says, write, whoop, this got a little complicated, didn't it? So I'm going to shrink out here a little bit so you can see it better. Write the ratio as a fraction in simplest form. And then what does it mean in words? So then we have to actually look at the picture. We are comparing flutes to drums. Okay, we're going to compare flutes to drums here. So we're going to write it as a fraction. So what it wants us to do is it wants us to write it in this third way right here, where we have the top number up top, and then we have the bottom number at the bottom, so the numerator and the denominator. So if I'm looking at this picture here, and you're looking closely, you can see that there are how many drums? 2 is hopefully what you said. And how many flutes are there? There's 4 flutes. So if I was writing this as a fraction, it wants us to compare flutes to drums. So it wants us to put our flutes first. So we're going to put our flutes first. So, and the way that I would write this as a fraction is 4 over 2, correct? Because I have 4 flutes and I'm comparing them to drums. It wants flutes first. So we're going to do 4 over 2. Okay? So that means for every 4 flutes, there are 2 drums. Okay? That's what it means in words. Let's try another one. Your turn. Write this ratio as a fraction in simplest form. So you're comparing here sandwiches to milk cartons. So you're going to do our sandwiches first. Put it as a fraction. Okay. Hopefully you counted this up correctly. If I were to count this up correctly, it wants me to find my sandwiches first. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 sandwiches. I'm going to put that up top. And then we're going to count our milk cartons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Boom. So that is my fraction. However, it wants us to put this in simplest form. So again, I have to figure out what can I take out of 4 and 10 in order to simplify it. Well, I know that 4 and 10 both divide by 2. So I'm going to put divide by 2, divide by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Can I take anything out of 2 and 5? No, I cannot, because they're not factors of each other. So we have 2/5 as our simplest form there. So the way I would say this in words then is how. So what does that mean in words if I have 2 over 5? What that means is for every 2 sandwiches, I have 5 milk cartons. For every 2 sandwiches, there are 5 milk cartons. That's what that would mean in words, right? Okay, only a couple more here. This one is a word problem, so let's think about this here. A class has 16 boys and 15 girls. What is the ratio of boys to girls? For this one, I'm going to have you write it in a different form. Okay, so look at the choices and see which one makes sense. A class has 6 boys and 15 girls. What is the ratio of boys to girls? Okay, remember we want to do simplest form? So you can do this with fractions, you can do this with colon. In this case, I'm going to put 6, and I'm going to put 15. Okay, I could have also written that like this, or I could have put 6 to 15. Okay, any way that we want. So then, just like we did in the last problem, we need to figure out what I can take out of 6 and 15 to make it simpler. Let me move back to the side around. Okay, so I can take 3 out of 6, and I can take 3 out of 15, right? Because if I had this as a fraction, I can divide that by 3, I can divide by that 3 to make it simpler. So 6 divided by 3 is 2, 15 divided by 3 is 5. So this ratio would actually be read as, for every 2 boys, there are 5 girls. Okay? See how that works? We brought it to simplest form, and then we read it as, there for every 2 boys, there are 5 girls. Okay. Do one last problem together today. This is just an intro day, so hopefully you're understanding this. Tommy has 8 Legos and 12 Hot Wheel cars. I used to love both of those as a kid. What is the ratio of Legos to Hot Wheels? So again, you can make this as a fraction, you can make this as a colon, you can make this with the word 2 in it. I'm just going to put it as a fraction because I think that's a little bit easier to simplify. So I have 8 over 12. 8 Legos over 12 Hot Wheels. For every 8 Legos, there are 12 Hot Wheel cars. Let's break that down a little further. I know that I can divide this by 2. I know that I can divide that by 2. So if I did that, that's going to equal 4 over 6. But then I'm looking at that 4 and 6, and I realize, boom, I can actually simplify that even more, right? So let's say I have to simplify it more. Let's take 2 out of the 4. Let's divide the 6 by 2 as well. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And now I see that 2/3 cannot be broken down any further, which means that 2/3 is my simplest form. So sometimes you might even need to do 2 steps in order to get to simplest form. All right. Hopefully this was easy for you to understand today. We're going to practice a little bit more with this tomorrow. This is just our intro with ratios. But if you're confused on greatest common factor, least common multiple, factors and multiples in general, or ratios, make sure you get a hold of me today so that we can set up a Google Meet, and then we can try to catch you up and try to do some practice problems together. All right. Keep up the great work, everybody. And if you need anything, make sure you email me and let me know.